Welcome back to another video. Today's topic is going to be about why I think that bodyweight training is overall the best way to train, and that everything comes at a cost. So, obviously it's been quite a while since I did my last video. I've been incredibly busy over the last sort of month, and then we had a bit of a Christmas downtime, so I just put making videos on the back burner, but of course carried on with the training and obviously posting to Instagram and stuff like that, so I guess you can see what I've been up to. But obviously today's topic is going to be about why I believe bodyweight training specifically is probably overall the best way to train as a human. We'll start off by dipping into why I believe primarily that this is the best way of training, and it really comes down to do with physical health. Okay, we have different types of health: mental health, physical health. Dipping into the physical health is really an understanding what health actually is, and it's ultimately a state of being free of injury or illness. Now, we can strip away the illness because there are other variables that control that, but more specifically with physical training, we want to be free of injury. So why then is bodyweight training, in my opinion, the best way to go about training for overall, health? Now, it's ultimately the way in which we're conducting ourselves when we're doing these training sessions. Using your body weight as the form of resistance, okay, there's a lot of research that's been done about resistance training and it being beneficial to support bone density, muscle tissue health, etc, etc. And that's all good, but obviously where is actually the limit where this is concerned? Because we have things like our joints to consider, and when you're increasing heavy amounts of weight, obviously these take a really, really hard beating. So that leads me to bodyweight training. Now, bodyweight training is a very organic way of increasing muscle mass, muscle strength, and then if you're doing it correctly and you want to incorporate the mobility style with exercises such as yoga, or just away from that kind of thing, just working on your mobility and taking care of and the health of your joints, then you've now got a complete sort of circle where every aspect of your physical health is taken care of. And of course, what comes with that, which most people want to train for, is the aesthetic side of it, especially if you're not goal driven in that you're doing it for sport or something like that. And I definitely, from 8 years of track cycling, having trained this way now, I've noticed my body physically changing in a way that's actually really nice, and I can actually look in the mirror and be like, wow, this is just from really doing bodyweight training, and it's technically looking better than it ever has done whilst I was a track cyclist. So a little thing to actually think about when as to why bodyweight training is so good is that, again, like I said before, using your body weight as the form of resistance is very individual. Okay, we often get caught in an environment where this guy's doing a back squat of 140, 150, whatever kilos, and you're like, okay, I need to do that. But you don't take in consideration things like bone density, joint capacity, in that they might have been doing it longer, so their joints might be more accepting of the additional stress that they're putting on it. And that's just a real basic level, but obviously when you're training in the bodyweight fashion, everything, you can't just jump straight to the hardest movement. You have to really build up progressive, and what that does, it allows joints and muscle tissue to sort of synchronize to become stronger overall. Whereas when you're doing things like leg press and deadlifts and back squats, there's a tendency to increase the weight rapidly. Now, the muscle capability will handle this, no problem, but the joints are now become the bottleneck, and excessive load on the joints like the hips and the knees and the ankles very quickly will become injuries. Okay, so we're stepping back, we're thinking, okay, what is health? Health, freedom of injuries. So I'll show you a video just quickly of a session I did probably a couple of years ago as a track cyclist, which was to develop my sort of explosive force, and it's known as a partial squat. And basically you really load up in terms of weight and just try to sort of accelerate the body upwards to generate physically as much force as you can. You can see there that I was using, I think, 320 kilos. And whilst that was great and it sort of benefited my sport, because you know, just training in that sort of fashion a couple of times before competition would get the brain really ready to fire and produce a lot of force, I question as to how long I can go training like that before something just breaks. Obviously there's people in the world that lift much more weight than that, but there's got to be a limit on how much we can actually lift in terms of force and what we subject our joints to, and or the spine and stuff like that. Now, a lot of people will talk about good form will impact that, and if you're lifting correctly and technically, then you know you won't get injured. And I kind of agree with that, but I also kind of don't, because if you think of our bodies as being capable of performing a basic movement like a squat, and you just go to sit down on a chair, obviously that's using your body weight, right? So you could, in theory, go throughout your life getting up and down from a chair with no real sort of elements. So because humans were never designed to probably squat 300 kilos or 400 kilos or whatever it is, or even deadlift that kind of weight, you have to sort of step back and think, how does that impact my longevity of training or of life? Sorry to be so sinister, but of life. And I start to look at overall, time that you can train, which is for some people when they're children and right up until 70, 80 years old. Think of that time period that you have as an overall capacity. Okay, think of it as, for instance, as water in a 1 litre jug. Now, every time you do perform an exercise or a movement pattern, it's how much of that water in theory gets evaporated from that jug. Okay, so if I go and do back squat or deadlift, with a heavy weight, even with good form, all I'm doing is wearing out my cycle. And that's where the other part of this video comes in, is that everything comes at a cost. So if I want overall health, long-term longevity over, the rest of my life, so I'm physically able to train, then I'm going to do the most efficient thing, and that yields the best results. Okay. Now, this became very apparent when I stopped cycling. And as I've said in previous videos, is that when I had no goal, to get stronger or more powerful, to benefit my sport, just doing that alone wasn't really going to cut it. More mentally, but also it got me thinking, like, the only reason I did that was because of my sport. If I continue to do that, I'm just going to decrease the amount of the longevity I have to train in general. And ideally, I'd like to have good health, all the way through my life. So as part of that, things like, and it's why a lot of people turn to yoga, because I believe that yoga probably is one of the best, because you have quite a few variations of yoga, but obviously you go from the flexibility, mobility side of it to the strength and control sort of elements of yoga. So as you get older, you find a lot of older people do yoga and they love it and they're in really good physical health. But I believe that bodyweight training, of course, with some really hard skills, comes at a cost as well. So, it's not free, but it's where I want to place that and what I feel is going to be most efficient over the long term. I'm not obviously saying don't train your squats and your deadlifts and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, it's up to you guys what you do. This is purely my belief and where, I see the most benefit to training in general. Of course, if you're doing a sport, then you must continue as normal, and just bear in mind that everything does come at a cost. Prime example of that actually is, if anyone does know of a famous bodybuilder called Ronnie Coleman, and this guy was just huge, right? And strong, and he had a super high work ethic to lifting ridiculous amounts of weight. Now, Ronnie Coleman, I can't remember how long ago, actually broke his back as a result of ridiculously heavy squats. But his goal was to be as big as physically possible and or aesthetic as possible within his sport. And the cost of that was that he broke his back with a risk of never being able to walk again. Obviously, in my head, there isn't anything worth it, but for some people, they have that goal so high that becomes everything to them. So it's important to focus on your goals in training. My perspective here is that why I think bodyweight training is the best. And something else that's really important as well that I've learned over the last sort of 6 months or so is that we, as humans, we really want the goal quickly. So if I'm developing a skill and I want a new skill, then it's like I want it now and I'm going to train to get that skill. And the problem is, again, we talk about these cycles of or that sort of litre capacity of water, and if I want to keep going at something and the body's responding and it's fatiguing to a point where the movement that I'm doing is actually not, it's beneficial in terms of my overall workload, but I'm going to start to develop sort of tendonitis in certain joints because it's just repetition, and then I get an overuse injury, then now what good is that? Because now I can't train to do the skill that I want to do. So there's means and ways of training around bodyweight training and just being very dynamic with how effective we are day to day within our session. But most importantly, what I want to take home from this is that why are we rushing? Okay, this is a really important thing that I believe. It's like, what's the rush? If I set on a journey to do my planche, which looks like this, and I set myself 6 months to a year, I'm going to do everything I can to try and achieve that. And what's the cost of that? The cost is that, I don't know, I might be able to do it effectively. I'm on my path to getting that, but if I just keep training it, I'm likely to get injured. I'm actually suffering from quite a lot of, fatigue, and if I push it too far, I know that something's just going to go bang, and that's even with bodyweight training. So again, that comes at a cost. So yeah, try not to rush, enjoy the process, and it's a hard state of mind to get into because we want results now, but who's got the stopwatch? Why is there a stopwatch? It doesn't need to be that way. Just enjoy the process, train, enjoy your training, and eventually you'll achieve what you want to achieve. Thanks for listening, guys. Of course, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. I'm going to start to come out with weekly content again. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.